Today I'm going to show you how to take your drums from this to this. Welcome to the NOIZ Hub Media YouTube channel. I'm Joey Vana. We're at my studio, The Sanctuary in downtown Downers Grove. And let's make your drums sound good, huh? All right, so first things first, I am using Logic, as you can see. And a big thing to get our sound is gonna be using Contact. We're using, if it'll load, thank you. We're using the new Get Good Drums One Kit Wonder Nu Metal. This thing's stupid. Like, it's so good. The minute I heard the video they put out, I heard the snare drum, that was an insta buy. So we're using that as like our core sound. Let me play that for you real quick without all of the juice. Here's what we got for like just a general drum sound. So that's not bad. That sounds really solid, but it doesn't have that certain, I don't want to say pizzazz, but it doesn't have the juice we need, right? So we want to find that slam in this. Like, if it's going to be metal, it needs to sound larger than life. And if it's not larger than life, we don't want it. So let's go to, first things first, let's take a look at the kick. Now I am going to sweeten things up. If there's no seasoning, it doesn't taste good, so I need to add a little juice. So I'm going to go first, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to look at the kick. And I'm adding trigger. Because if we're already using fake drums, there's never too many samples. Maybe there's enough samples, but we're still going to use more. So let me show you what that is. I'm using kick 11 because why would you not? And then I'm using the main kick, which is from Taylor Larson's Drum Shot library with Luke Holland, which is kind of a throwback. But if you don't have it, I recommend taking a look. All right, so let me give you a sound of that. All three of the kicks together. Not bad, that sounds really good. And if this was a hard rock song, that would make sense, but it's not. Now we're gonna add CLA's Mix Hub. I use light because it's less intrusive. I learned that from a good friend of mine near Z. It's what we do, I guess. So check this out, I'm adding a little bit atop, a little bit of that mid, cutting out some of that boxiness we just don't want. And you gotta add the juice at the bottom. If we're not adding the bottom, we're not doing anything right. So we're doing that here, and let me just give you what that sounds like. Now we're getting somewhere. It's starting to sound a little bit more clicky. It does have a little bit of room. Bear with me. I like a little room in my drums. Last thing on this chain, we're doing a Pro Q3 because everybody else does, so why don't we? I'm adding a little bit of 6. Taking out some of that boxiness again at 255, taking down the low end, surprisingly at 100, because that's where our bass is chilling. We want the low lows where it kind of just blooms out and sounds big. We leave a little bit of room for the bass player, even if he is MIDI, he still has feelings. So let's do, let's give that a vibe check real quick. Now you hear we're starting to get that click. We're starting to get that punch. We're starting to get closer to where we want to be. Next things up is going to be our snare, which I'm going to keep my kick in because I come from that standpoint of where you have to mix them as you go, but you want to mix them all together. If you just have one thing at a time, you're never going to get that gel. You're never going to get it to feel like everything's together. It's already MIDI drums, so it's already a little fake. I want it to feel like somebody went in and slammed these parts out. All right, so now we're taking a look at the snare. There it is. Now you can hear, that's a pretty big snare feeling thing, but we're gonna add trigger because why not? So we're gonna give it just a little bit more sauce. We're only at like 31%, but again, we're doing the Taylor Larson drum shots. We're doing the main snare. And let's hear what that sounds like with kick and snare with just the sample added in. Now we just went from alter bridge to wage war in about like 5 seconds, which is where we're trying to be. All right, so from there, we're gonna make our way to our good buddy Steven Slate. We're just gonna process the snare right here. So we've got this Neve-esque, I shouldn't say Neve, but it's gonna be close to it. And we're adding a little bit of top end. We're adding a little bit of that like 3.5. We're gonna pull out a little bit of that low boxiness again, and then we're gonna bump, what is this at? It's at 84, we're slamming that through, because that's just gonna make it have that larger than life thing. And then we're using a red, what is it, the FG that they have in Slate. So now here we're going back to show you what this compressor is doing here. You'll see not too much. It's maybe getting to 3. We don't need to do too much because honestly, we're gonna slam the bus pretty good, bussin'. So we don't really need to do too much of that over the top right on the track as an insert. And I added revival, which is kind of just like whatever you love in life, it gives you more. So you've got a little of that high end, gives you more. And that thickness, as it says, it gives you more of that too, which kind of just, well, I'll just show you. Yeah, that's what we need. All right, so next we're gonna move on to the toms. This is kind of a short little track. My buddy Dan Reitz out of Chicago wrote it for me. Cue picture of Dan. He's a good dude, writes some really cool songs. But what I like about this is Dan wrote this in his 10x10 bedroom using a little Scarlett 2i2, a couple of plugins here and there, nothing too crazy. So if you're working at home, this is it. Like, I totally get it. Like, you don't have to have the Apogee, the Apollos, all the crazy stuff. We're making this happen with the small stuff too, because music is music no matter what you use. All right, so let's take a look at the toms real quick. They only happen one time, so honestly, it's pretty straightforward. I just threw the CLA drum plugin. Listen, it's an all-in-one, and I get it. You can say hateful things in the comments. You won't hurt my feelings because I got this done quicker than you would if you used 4 or 5 plugins. It's not really one of those things where you need to argue about it. It's just try it. And this thing sounds killer. So let's hear the toms real quick. Now I know what you're gonna say, there's a little bit too much ring in that. And I kind of agree with you, but in the context of the mix, when it's not soloed like that, it sounds really good. Now we're gonna get to more of the meat and potatoes of the drums as kind of filling out the sound. So we're gonna get to our overheads. So when I just add them in without any processing, they honestly sound really good. It's a great library, so it makes it sound good, but let's give it a listen. All right, that sounds good, but we need the kind of, it's larger than life, right? So it needs to have that impact, which means, well, first we're gonna get the compression for sure, but first we're gonna start it with good buddy NOIZ Hub Lite. Again, another trick a buddy of mine showed me is he puts the plate plugin in this. So let me show you my settings. So what I use is the drum overhead preset. I don't touch anything. It's literally that preset, but I'm using only 9%, which is not much, but that little bit of depth is what makes your overheads go from sounding sterile and no fun to like just vibe machine. That is all I can say, it's vibe machine. Let's just get a vibe for that. I added some 8K as we do, took out some mids and did a little bit of filtering just to make it not so muddy, but let's see what that sounds like. Right off the bat. Now we got some overheads that are starting to really feel good. Now I hate to be that guy, but there was a frequency I didn't like, so I took it out. Some people like doing this, some people don't. Honestly, I didn't for a while. Now I just cannot. If I hear a little frequency here and there that's bugging me, it has to go away. Next, it's not a mix if it doesn't have CLA 76 on it. Listen to this, it's gonna be slamming the overheads, but it's gonna make them breathe a little. To me, that's like we just added a little salt and pepper. It's like we had something that tasted good, but we just added that little something. It's like, was it Salt Bay? Just one of those little things right there. We just took it from where the steak is good to where it's great. So now we're gonna check out the rooms, which I might have lied a little bit at the beginning because I said we weren't gonna solo anything. We're gonna solo the rooms because the rooms are important and there's a lesson to be learned in them. So here's the rooms, which sound great. That's killer. That's great. Not too bright, but still too bright. You need to cut out some of the high end from your rooms. I learned this the hard way many times. So I'm trying to understand, why is my mix have a little too much of that sizzle, but it's not the vocals, it's not the guitars. I was trying to find it, and I was slamming rooms, and there's just all this high end stuff that we don't want. We also don't want mud. So it's kind of like I EQ'd this in a way where I have a little bit of mid-range, but not too much, not a lot of high. It's very neutral feeling. So that way when I slam it with a compressor, it gives you exactly what you need. So let's take a look at that. Now we'll listen to it. So it's not a drastic change, but I promise you in the long run, you're gonna love me for that one. All right, so now let's put on the CLA 76, which I use the silver version, or the blue stripe, because it actually takes a little low end out, and I want that. So let's have it slam a little bit. Now what you should be hearing is on that track, it feels like the snare drum is jumping out at me. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, we're talking like argument, throwing stuff around the room, aggressively, just like in your face, whatever you want to use to describe it, it's that. All right, so now real quick, before we get to bus processing and all that fun stuff, let's just hear what we got with all those plugs that we put on, right? So let's hear it. That sounds awesome. So now we've got the snappiness of the snare, the kick sounds big, it's everything we've been looking for and more. But we're gonna go one step further. So the next step, I would look at P-comp, I call it, parallel compression. Basically, you're running stuff next to it. So if you got a race and two people are running with each other, that's parallel. As if they were running on top of each other, that's series. All right, so I'm gonna go through this a little bit quicker, but I'm running this EQ because I wanna add sizzle, I don't want muddiness, and I don't need the mid-range because I already have that. What I'm looking for is excitement. And a lot of the excitement for the snare is gonna be in that high end and this type of music, right? So we wanna use that, so let's turn that guy on. Next, we're gonna use CLA 76 because apparently I don't know any other plugins. And we have that set in a kind of medium attack, quick release because I want it to pump. I do want it to pump, but it is gonna be doing a good amount of gain reduction. I'll leave that on the screen so you can see how much. And then this is like a little bit of a secret sauce thing. This is the Mix Wave, the Benson Geranium Boost. It's a guitar pedal. And they were genius in making it into a plugin and showing it in ways that you don't have to use it for guitars. So it's like saturation, basically. And what it does is it colors the sound of this so it's not quite so bright and brittle. It's just real, it just makes it slam. We'll call that the slam plugin. All right, so here, let's give a listen to the drums. Now we're gonna engage that. It immediately now the whole kit is just jumping out. Not just the snare, the whole thing is jumping out. All right, next, we're gonna use Verb, which we're partnered with NOIZ Hub, who's partnered with Kit, and this is a great plugin. So we're gonna use the Blackbird Chamber A. This thing's awesome. I have it set to direct mode. I'm using the 414s. Now, one thing, when you're setting a verb, you want the time to feel right. So you don't want it to be where you have this crazy long reverb with fast parts. So when I play this, what I did, little trail there, what I did is you can move the height right here. I moved this around until the timing of the snare to the next kick felt right, or the time from snare, or however you want to look at it. But that is imperative to do. I did that. I cut a little bit of the low out, a little bit of the low mid, because you don't need muddiness. And I did saturate it a little bit. But, so it's like right now it sounds like this if I solo it, just so you can get a vibe. That sounds wild, but in context, it's awesome. All right, so now here's our drums. No processing on the bus yet, but this is what we got. All right, so now I'm gonna insert it's called the shameless plug. The shameless plug is where I ask you very kindly to like and subscribe. Anyways, so I'm now gonna insert the API drum bus, because I'm a boomer, unapologetic, and I like API stuff, even if it's not cool anymore. So now we're gonna listen to that real quick and take a look at how much gain reduction I'm doing. Not much, not much. We're just kissing it a little bit. Just a little bit of love in the back end. All right, now we're gonna use Decapitator because we want a little bit of saturation. What that'll do is it'll tighten up our high end, but make everything a little bit more chaotic. So it's kind of like, even though that's a counterintuitive statement, it makes sense when you listen to it. So let's put that on. Immediately, the snare drum has body it didn't have before. So remember, everything you do on your tracks, you're gonna do it a little further with your bus, but it should make all those moves make sense. So you make these moves, and then you make this one is like the glue to make it so everything makes sense together. All right, now we're gonna do a little bit of EQ. I'm using the SSL because I didn't want anything too crazy, but I like the way it sounds when I throw it on there. All I'm adding is 16. So I'm adding big brightness, because if you listen to a lot of the big metal and metalcore records and stuff like that, the cymbals, the drums, they have this brightness to it that just can't be denied, and that's how we're gonna get that. And look, I'm only touching it 2 dB, but this plugin, it adds a lot. No matter how much you put into it, you get a lot out. So you don't gotta do too much. Let's listen to that real quick before we get to the last piece. The snare drum has come to life. It's like a different thing. Lastly, I'm gonna limit it a little bit. I'm gonna put it in place. It's like when you're a kid and you do something wrong and they put you in the corner. That's what we're doing with this. Not in a bad way. It's just, I'm sorry, drummers, we don't want you to we can't have you go over the top of everything. The guitar player needs a little bit of love, bass for sure, and then obviously the vocals are most important. So the last thing we need is a limiter. So that's just gonna keep everything in place a little bit more. And honestly, with this style of music, everything is so slammed. You need this, or else it'll have too much dynamic. And when you go into like a breakdown or something, it's just not gonna feel right. So I am doing the punchy setting on the Pro L2 from FabFilter. And I'm just doing a little bit of reduction, nothing too crazy. I'll play it for you so you can see it on the screen. I like that. It's just nice and easy. All right, so now that we have our whole drum track ready to go, we'll incorporate everything else, which I mixed earlier on. But the one thing I'm gonna challenge you to is comment down below, what's one thing that you have on your drum bus that you can't live without? Because for me, I just can't. If I don't have this API plugin on there, nothing sounds right to me. It just doesn't make any sense. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna unleash the beast here, unsolo everything, and I'm gonna let you hear the fruits of our labor. All right, that sounded awesome. We have the high end that's slamming. We got the mid range that feels good. We got the low end to be cooking. Our reverb sounded really good. And if you want another video for that, which helped me a lot, on our channel, Joe Carroll graciously did a great video on the Blackbird Studio A. So definitely check that out. This is Smoking. I hope I helped you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.